Okay, welcome to this deep dive. You've shared some fascinating sources with us, and yeah, we're absolutely ready to jump in.
Definitely looking forward to exploring these.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into a really remarkable story from Nepali history and literature, actually. It's centered around a writer, a specific book, and, well, the powerful, sometimes dangerous effect of ideas.
That ripple effect, yeah.
The key players that, come up in the sources you sent are Krishnalal Adhikari and his book.
Oh.
It seems simple at first glance. Makai Koketi.
Which translates to maize cultivation.
Exactly.
But what's really clear right from the start when you look at this material is that this is not just some farming guide. Not at all.
Far from it.
Yeah. The sources paint this picture of, like, hidden messages, veiled criticism,
Yeah.
and the very real, very high stakes of trying to speak truth to power back then.
During the Rana rule in Nepal, right?
Yeah.
An absolute monarchy.
Precisely. Absolute rule. And the material you shared, it really highlights how this book got the, well, grim distinction of being the first book ever banned in Nepali history.
The very first one. Wow.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive using your sources is to really unpack Krishnalal Adhikari's story. Try to figure out what was actually going on inside Makai Koketi,
Yeah.
beneath the surface level.
Well, what was the subtext?
And understand why it was suppressed so forcefully. And maybe explore its lasting impact, too, on Nepali thought, on literature.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right, so the sources introduce us to Krishnalal Adhikari. He's presented as this notable figure from, well, the early days of modern Nepali literature, described as a thinker, a writer, a journalist, and they place his birth around 1966 BS.
Which is, what, roughly 1909, 1910 AD?
Something like that, yeah. And he comes across as educated, incredibly fearless, actually, holding strong views.
Yeah, the material you shared really emphasizes that. He wasn't afraid to look critically at Nepali society, at how things were being run under the Ranas.
Exactly. And the sources even mention he contributed to Gorakhpatra.
Which was the government's own newspaper, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. But clearly his writing wasn't just about echoing the state line. He was trying to, raise public awareness, introduce some critical thinking.
It's almost poetic, or maybe just tragic. The sources directly say his pen, just the act of writing and sharing ideas.
That's what did it.
That's what led him down this path, ending in prison and, well, ultimately his death.
Which brings us right to the heart of it, Makai Koketi.
The book itself.
Yeah. The sources suggest he wrote it around 1999 BS. So what's that, 1942-43 AD?
Okay.
Now, on the surface, like you said, it looked exactly like the title suggests, a technical guide.
All about growing maize, planting, manure, irrigation.
Right, all the practical stuff a farmer would need. Best practices.
And that outward appearance, as the sources reveal, that was absolutely crucial, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. It was camouflage. Essential.
Yeah.
Because underneath all that farming advice...
There was something else entirely.
Exactly. A sharp, biting political and social message. Adhikari masterfully used maize cultivation as this deeply symbolic way to critique everything.
Like what specifically?
Well, the sources mention rampant corruption, the autocratic rule, exploitation of the people, the ignorance the regime kind of fostered, that iron grip the Ranas had.
Wow. All hidden in a farming manual.
That's where it gets really interesting. The sources give actual examples. Like, think about this. They say he compared pests and diseases attacking the maize to the corrupt tendencies of the rulers and officials.
Ah, okay. So the blight on the corn is like the corruption in the government.
Precisely. And he didn't just talk about low crop yields as, a simple farming problem.
Right.
The sources say he linked that lack of success, the poor harvest, directly to fundamental flaws in the governance system itself.
So you're saying the country isn't thriving because the leadership is like rust on the crops.
That's the kind of allegory he was using, yeah. It's brilliant, really.
And necessary, too. It serves to make that clear. You just could not say these things openly back then.
Absolutely not. Impossible. So he adopted the symbolic language using something familiar, everyday farming.
As a metaphor to critique the whole state of the nation.
Yeah.
The health of society.
And despite being, as the sources put it, a good and public awareness-raising book, something meant to help people.
It got banned. Makai Koketi became the first work in Nepali literary history to face censorship.
The very first. The Rana officials, well, they weren't fooled for long.
They saw through the disguise.
Apparently so. The sources say they saw it for what it was underneath, and they called it sedition.
Sedition, so writing aimed at inciting rebellion.
Essentially, yes. against the state. So they filed a case against him.
And the sentence?
Severe. 10 years in jail.
10 years. Wow.
And the sources mention he tried, a desperate move. He resigned from his government job and even tried to dedicate the book to the prime minister, maybe to show loyalty or just try and get out of it.
But it didn't work.
No, didn't work. His health just went downhill in prison, unfortunately.
And the sources say he died there, incarcerated for writing a book.
Tragically, yes. Died in prison for his words.
This whole story really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About, the power of ideas versus censorship. Brute force.
It does. And the sources highlight that Makai Koketi is seen as this pioneering work. It started a whole symbolic writing style in Nepali literature that others picked up on.
Right, so its impact went beyond just getting banned.
Absolutely. The sources argue it marked a major shift. It showed that literature could be way more than just, entertainment or tradition.
It became a tool.
A potent tool, yeah, for building social and political consciousness among people.
And his courage, his method. It inspired later writers, didn't it?
It seems so. To take risks, to write critically about power, even if they still had to be indirect about it sometimes.
Yeah.
The sources suggest his work kind of foreshadowed, maybe even laid groundwork for later literary movements in Nepal. Things like realism, progressivism, even Marxist influences.
All trying to engage with social and political reality through literature.
Exactly.
So just to sort of recap the journey the sources took us on, we started with what looked like a simple book on growing maize.
Very practical.
Then we uncovered how it was actually this powerful political allegory.
Deeply critical.
And tragically, how publishing it led to, terrible consequences for Adhikari.
Yeah, imprisonment and death.
Yeah.
The sources really drive home how Makai Koketi used that symbolic language brilliantly to critique society, critique governance, when direct criticism was just impossible, way too dangerous.
And the significance is, the sources emphasize again and again, it's huge. This wasn't just a book, it was a turning point.
Definitely. It showed literature could be this force for awareness, changing its role beyond just, stories or preserving culture.
And ultimately, the sources make that really moving point about ideas versus censorship, don't they?
They do. Krishnalal Adhikari, his physical presence, his ability to write openly, that was silenced, contained by the state.
But the ideas.
But the ideas, the critique, the call for awareness he embedded so cleverly in Makai Koketi, those couldn't be stopped. They survived. They went on to inspire others.
It leaves you with a lot to think about.
Yeah.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, drawing on these themes from the sources.
Yeah.
Consider how ideas, especially challenging ones, critical ones, how they find ways to persist, to spread and influence people, even when powerful forces are actively trying to shut them down.
It's a powerful question.
Maybe think about what modern parallels you might see today. People using allegory, symbolism, other indirect ways to voice criticism or share difficult truths when speaking directly is hard or risky.
Still very relevant.
Definitely food for thought.
Well, thank you so much for providing the sources that let us take this deep dive. It was fascinating.
Really illuminating material.
And that concludes this deep dive.